We have our expert panel ready to go this afternoon. And thank you to Rachel Smith, special prosecutor on the Idaho trial regarding Lori Vallow, joining us. Again, Rich Robertson, private investigator, and also worked with Brandon Boudreaux on his case. Judge Mel McDonald, former prosecutor, former U.S. attorney, and former judge. And then we got Benjamin Taylor, a criminal defense attorney here in the Phoenix metro area. You guys have been following this along with us even since the last trial. There was a bit of a delay in the courtroom today in a sidebar that lasted 30 minutes or so that we didn't get to hear about. I know we're all speculating on what that could be, but what it led us to was Ryan Pillar, the lead agent on the case, did not take the stand as he was supposed to continue his testimony, or waiting for him, waiting for Trina to finish direct exam. Benjamin, is this normal?
It's very abnormal. This is not normal that you see a witness take the stand and then get off the stand and either go home or maybe come back in the future. So there must have been some sort of objection to evidence that either Lori must have made in order for the detective to leave the stand, because that's not normal in every day. Usually the detective testifies, Lori cross-examines it, and then you redirect by the prosecutor. So for somebody to leave the stand, it sounds like the judge might be taking and looking into some sort of motion or evidence that they don't want the public to hear about.
And when we talked about Ryan Pillar last Friday, we talked about this door possibly being opened by Lori Daybell and Trina K ready to walk through that door and talk about her prior murder conviction. So who knows if it has something to do with that. But would you say that this throws off any timing? Rachel, what do you say about that? Is he's going to have to come back and Trina will have to reestablish some questioning of what and answers that the jury had heard on, 3 days ago?
Well, it's certainly not optimal. You never like to have your witnesses' direct examination interrupted. You don't like to have their testimony interrupted, especially without getting cross done. So this is highly unusual. And it does throw off. He's a seasoned witness. He's a seasoned detective. He's now command rank. Trina's a seasoned prosecutor. I don't expect it'll throw them much. I think the bigger concern is there something the court is considering striking? Usually when there's a delay like this, but not always, it means that the defense has raised some objection to what's coming next. And it could be some objection to, saying, hey, I wasn't given something, or this is a surprise. And it's something the court needs time to research. So it's not optimal, but both the prosecutor and the witness are very experienced, very qualified, and clearly the judge wants to take some time to make sure he gets it right.
Hey, Rich, we're talking about this license plate reader in the Jeep. This is something that had a lot to do with the work you were doing back in 2019. This is important testimony, seeing the suspect vehicle 26 hours before the shooting with no rear wheel on the back.
Yeah, that's kind of telling that story about the history of that Jeep and following it along chronologically. And certainly those license plate readers are a valuable resource for that. Those readers are all over the place. Law enforcement has a variety of them in different locations, and along the interstate is a popular place for it. A lot of cases have been built and challenged, frankly, because of those license plate readers out there. And there are private license plate readers as well. We use those in my work. There's access to license plate readers that are collected privately. Some of these cameras are mounted on like tow trucks and taxi cabs and things like that. We don't have access to police license plate readers, but we do have access to the private ones. And in fact, I found a picture on a license plate reader of that Jeep back in 2019. That picture was taken as it was driving along the freeway about 2 weeks after Charles Vallow was killed. So and I could see the tire on the back and knew exactly where it was at that date and time. So anytime you combine all those kinds of resources, it helps tell the chronological story.
Yeah, I see that. I remember you sharing that photo with us way back when the tire is on, but you see the license plate, and it looks like a dark gray Jeep. Sometimes in the lighting, it depends. It sometimes seems more green, sometimes seems more gray. But Lori and Cross, she got a little chuckle out of trying to poke holes on the witness's testimony regarding how there are thousands of cameras, but yet there were no other photos of the Jeep on certain days besides this photo. And she has a little chuckle, and that had to be stricken from the record, the reaction she made. Judge Mel, you following her conduct, and it seems like she's just having a good time in there. Judge, you're muted right now. Rachel, I'm going to let you take the answer on this one, and then we'll go back to Mel.
Yeah, she does seem to be really enjoying herself. And as I was watching, I thought, oh boy, this witness is really, really hurting her, because he worked in ideas of evading the cameras. He worked in ideas on how it's used to hide things. So I think Lori is so in tune with her own behavior in the courtroom that she's missing, some real powerful evidence that if the jury's paying attention, it's going to hurt her.
Judge Mel, we got you back on. Go ahead.
Yes, I was just going to say that all of the details in this case, I think the turning point of this entire 5-case series was Brandon Boudreaux and Rich Robertson, their work. Up until that time, we had a couple of deaths, but they were basically clear in Arizona, and I think with the death of Tammy Daybell, clear in Idaho. It was this shooting and the work that was put in by Brandon, the key evidence, and then Rich with his background, knowing where to root the investigation. I think that their efforts were absolutely fabulous in what they were able to accomplish. It turned the tide. Once that's focused, then the question, well, where are the kids? And so the snowball started going down the hill. We had 2 people dead, but it was the failed shooting of Brandon and Rich's response in alerting authorities and then putting the pieces together, and then the missing kids that broke this thing wide open. I think that Brandon has done a tremendous job. I think Rich's investigation and the direction he gave was superb.
Yeah, if Brandon were to be hit and did not survive, this could be a totally different story. He has been an X factor in all of this and really getting Gilbert PD, a small police department, really considered a town, not even a city, but getting Ryan Pillar to look into what happened in Idaho with Tammy Daybell, who had not had an autopsy, was buried in a Utah grave and had to be exhumed, and that had to come, with the help of Fremont County authorities, really a multi-agency effort. We have the search warrant to obtain and recover that Jeep out of Rexburg, Idaho, and that happened in November. So, and that has to do with Rexburg Lieutenant Ray Hermosillo, who will take the stand. Rachel, tell me how valuable Hermosillo is going to be on the stand.
Ray Hermosillo, it's hard to say that any one person changed anything, in the sense of they all did such incredible work. There was great work and collaboration from law enforcement, but certainly one of the standouts in terms of their dedication, their hard work, their attention to detail was Ray Hermosillo, and his work in doing that search warrant, in following his guts when he interviewed Lori and saying something's just not right between him and now Sheriff Ball, just following that instinct. Their work made a huge difference, and had they made different choices, we might not be sitting here. So his work is going to be really powerful for this jury, and he is going to highlight the collaboration between the different agencies.
And we talked about this. This is an opportunity where the door can be opened if Lori does cross-exam on Hermosillo and asks certain questions that she probably shouldn't ask into related separate investigations. Trina K has warned, and Judge Bresky has warned about this, that we could find out about what happened in Idaho. This is going to be a true X factor of a witness. But Benjamin, second time we've had a witness taken out of order, and the first one was Brandon Boudreaux, where he couldn't be cross-examined for some time. I don't know if this is tactic. I don't know who is doing what to lead to the witness taken out of order. But like you said, it is abnormal. Now, in the opportunity for cross with the window tint shop owner, Lori didn't go up there. Is this, her learning to, like you said, not ask questions where you don't really know the answers to? The tint is very key in this case.
Yes, the tint is very key to this case. However, too, you don't want a witness that damages your case to be on the stand longer. Sometimes you just want them to move along, don't ask any questions, and hopefully the jury maybe forgets about them. So that might be a strategy that Lori and her advisory council might be thinking of. And as you mentioned, Justin, earlier, when witnesses call out of order, as we recall, Lori was sick for a couple of days, right? So that could have messed with the prosecutor's order of witnesses, because a lot of times people fly in, people have other things, other cases they have to work on. So a lot of times you tell the judge, say, Judge, my witnesses were set for these certain days. However, because Lori was sick, it has messed up my whole schedule. So that's why you might be seeing some of these witnesses being called out of order. But yes, Lori might have learned from her first trial what to ask, what not to ask. I mean, she's still not asking the greatest of questions, but she didn't want the window tint person on there, because that shows that there might have been a motive to make the tint darker. So that way, whoever was driving that car, that vehicle, that Jeep, couldn't be seen.
Yeah, I mean, you make a good point, because Dan Moss is from Rexburg, Idaho. With traveling itineraries, flights, they might want to get him out of the way, get him back on his way home, and then finish, testimony with Ryan Pillar later. And him being the case agent, he's been sitting at that prosecution table since last week, since the beginning of this. Apparently, Moss put on 5% tint on top of 20% factory tint. Very, very dark. Rich Robertson, how do you think that comes across to the jury, hearing that explanation, the process of what went on before the shooting?
Well, I think just the fact that there was a deliberate effort to make it dark and therefore presumably hide the occupants of that Jeep is certainly not going to be lost on the jury. I think it's going to be pretty evident just from a timing standpoint that they put the tint on the Jeep when they did. It's the timing that sort of suggests that there was a motive, a specific reason for doing it at that time.
Are you just waiting for video of that storage unit to be shown with Lori, Chad, Alex on different days? And, quite possibly the person on the stand helping review that video could be Hermosillo, someone with Rexburg PD. I mean, that storage unit video showing the dismantling basically of parts from the Jeep. I feel like we've heard from jurors how surveillance video really, really makes an impact on them.
Yeah, it's a circumstantial case, so every one of these pieces becomes part of telling the story. And one of the problems I think that Rachel alluded to is trying to tell this story in a particular order so that the jury understands what's happening when. These jurors come in here with a blank slate. They have no idea what's coming or anything else. And the danger is always that you're presenting evidence that you, as the prosecutor or even the defense side, when it happens, that it's important, and that you're building on something that's going to come later. The jurors have no idea, and therefore they frequently miss things that are important. They don't realize when they're hearing it that it's important at all, because they have nothing to compare it to it yet. And so taking witnesses out of order, it makes it more difficult to tell a cohesive story that that the jurors are going to understand. I think that window tinting and the storage video probably are self-evident, and I don't think the jurors are going to miss the importance of those.
And real quick, to Rich's point, the jury might get lost in some of this. And I asked this question in the last trial. Rachel, What we haven't heard is in this trial is the jury ask any questions yet. And I know we're not even really kind of a week in on this, but we're halfway through the prosecution's witnesses, and there hasn't been one question from the jury yet. I don't know really what to make of that. As a prosecutor, what would you make of that? Considering you just prosecuted a similar case where there were a number of questions throughout the trial from the jury, and it's possible the prosecution could rest by the end of the week. They haven't got one question from the jury. What is there to make of it, if anything?
I think for me as a prosecutor, I don't typically practice in a place where the jury can ask questions. However, in those places where they can, a couple of days with short, clear testimony, you don't worry about it too much. If there's a couple of days where there's a little bit more complicated testimony, perhaps once they get into the iCloud, get into some of the other witness testimony with regards to Alex's whereabouts and the cell phone data, if there aren't questions then I would be nervous. But right now, the testimony isn't complicated. The witnesses have been very clear. Lori's questions have not tripped anybody up or been salacious. So I think I'd be watching, but realistically, I'd be okay because the witnesses have been clear, concise, and to the point.
Let's take a look at our poll question right now. I've been asking our viewers today as far as who has been the strongest witness in trials so far, and overwhelmingly it's been Brandon Boudreaux out of the options. Ryan Pillar, 3%. He's yet to finish his testimony. Nate Duncan, Chandler Police Detective, 4%, 600 people voting. Judge Mel, I'm sure you agree. This is witness number 11 that we just got done with in the DA official. And so there's a total of 22 on the state's witness list. Do you think that the state could breeze through this and get done by the end of the week with this case in chief?
Yes, I do think that they could. I just had one observation I wanted to make. When I was United States Attorney in 1981, we instituted a program which they call the LECC, Law Enforcement Coordination Committee, where we brought state, we brought local, we brought federal to try to team up. At one time, I became a special prosecutor of a state double murder case as part of this program. I think this case highlights what that objective was. We have people from Idaho, from Arizona, different agencies, federal agencies, experts. It is impressive to see all of these different forces coordinating and cooperating and taking this puzzle with 200 pieces and one by one laying these pieces out. The circumstantial evidence this building is overwhelming. And I think this is a testament to Idaho and Arizona state authorities, federal authorities, Gilbert, Chandler, Rexburg, all working together to build this case. I think it's a tribute and a testimony that they can take this and put it together.
And they've been doing it now for 4 trials over the past 2 years, since 2023 as far as trials, but really working back beyond that into the 2020 year. And then you can't forget Kauai Police as well. So yeah, definitely a lot of agencies here. We're going to start taking some questions from the chat box. Jenny Allison is asking, what else does Lori need to do in order for the door to open wide enough for Trina K to bring in other crimes she's committed? And it seems like Lori is calling their bluff. Benjamin, what do you have to say about that?
Lori's getting to that line right there, but she hasn't 100% crossed the line. But that's what the judge might be talking about in chambers. I mean, basically, if she brings up that she's a great person, if she says that, I would never do anything like this, I love my kids, anything pertaining to the prior trials, that can open the door for all this new evidence to come in. Because as we discussed earlier, the jury does not know about or all these other trials that she was being convicted of. They're supposed to only focus on this case and this case only. So she's getting close to crossing that line, and we'll see whether or not the judge will allow Trina K to come in and cross-examine her or bring up any prior bad acts if Lori does cross that line with these witnesses coming up.
And we have a question from Charlie Barrow asking why Chad Daybell is not being implicated in this case. Now, we know that Gilbert PD did recommend a charge as well when they submitted it to the county attorney's office, but for non-likelihood of a conviction, MCAO just chose to bring this case against Lori Daybell. Rich Robertson, from your history on the case and studying this through Brandon Boudreaux's case, it is very clear that Chad Daybell was, orchestrating things, alongside his girlfriend and then now current wife. But is it just because he wasn't in Arizona physically and would be hard to prove any case against him? I think you're muted, Rich.
Sorry about that.
No worries.
Yeah, I think it just depends on the evidence that the prosecution has. I have said before I don't have access to any of the disclosures that were offered in this case, but if they've got LPR, the license plate readers, they've got GPS, they've got phone records, they've got text messages. If those don't include Chad, then you don't have the evidence. The same discussion about Melanie Pulowski, Boudreaux. It's what evidence do they have? I think it was that surprise announcement from the prosecutor that her case is still under investigation, but I suspect it's because they were waiting to see what would come out of this trial, what kind of testimony the defense might bring in that might help in that case. But it's the same situation. You just either have enough evidence or you don't, and make a charging decision. There's a lot of discretion that goes on among the prosecutors as to where they bring the charges and maybe they just didn't want to confuse the case anymore. Stay focused on this particular one. They would wind up having to do it twice because undoubtedly that would be severed as well, just like the murder cases were. So, it's just a lot of things that go into making those kinds of decisions.
Yeah, there's video evidence, obviously, from the storage unit where it looks like it could be Chad Daybell. I'm sure there's text messages where Chad and Lori have referred to Brandon as a dark spirit. Chad, in the text message, this was brought up, Rachel, you know about this, saying that Brandon and the Gadiantons referred to them as this group that were basically bad people when they found out that Lori wasn't the life insurance beneficiary for Charles's $1 million life insurance policy. And I think a lot of people want to see other people found accountable. But Judge Mel, you've been in that office, the county attorney's office. If you can explain how, you really want a very airtight case against the person you're going to prosecute, the person that you want to file charges against.
Well, the criteria a prosecutor looks at is the reasonable likelihood of conviction. There are going to be tremendous resources, as Rich pointed out. It'll probably be a severed trial. You also look at the current situation. Chad Daybell is a serial killer. He's been sentenced to death. You can incur that expense of bringing witnesses back again for his trial. But is it worth it? And given the bits and pieces of evidence, the same with Melanie. There are some interesting, fascinating facts. Nobody knew where Brandon lived other than Melody and a few other people. These are the kinds of evidence. It's circumstantial evidence. But the fact, when you looked at, she was with Lori and Chad shortly before, and all of these circumstances, these are things the prosecutor weighs. And he has to ask himself, is there a reasonable likelihood of conviction? Is there a reasonable likelihood that we can prove Chad or Melody are a part of this conspiracy to take out Brandon? And so these are prosecution decisions. Over the years, as a county prosecutor and as U.S. attorney, we made thousands of those. And I think the point has been made. We have to wait and see if these pieces fall into place. It's been clear it's not over. They're still looking, and we may have another case yet down the road.
Yeah, and to be clear, disclaimer, Melanie Pulowski has not been charged. Chad Daybell has not been charged in this case regarding Brandon Boudreaux. Prosecutor Trina Kay did confirm that there isn't an open investigation involving Melanie Pulowski, which was big news just the other day. Now, for those who are wondering, with Chad Daybell being inmate, a death row inmate in Idaho. That's an automatic appeal situation when you are sentenced to death. But now Lori Daybell's appeal is in motion in Idaho, and this is also very normal for that to be filed when you have been convicted of murder. Rachel, I'd like to ask you about that. I mean, what are the chances? I don't know if you've read through that appeal, but this is not something that we're surprised about that being put forward.
No, I've read the appeal for Lori. What is interesting, I think, probably factored into some of Trina's decisions down in Arizona, one of the big issues on appeal is the use of 404B in Idaho, which was used pretty extensively with a hearing. I don't see anything in the appeal that surprised me. There's nothing in there that gives us heartburn. There was extensive briefing on all of the issues, but the major two issues in Idaho are the use of that 404B, the prior bad acts, the evidence from Arizona. They're complaining about that in Idaho, and the removal of her prior attorney. And I suspect some of that factored into the prosecution's decisions on what they were going to do, how they were going to do it down in Arizona. If Trina doesn't get into the 404B, and she withdrew that motion down in Arizona, and if the record is really good about Lori being her own attorney, the issues that exist in Idaho for the Supreme Court to look at do not exist in Arizona. So I think you're seeing a contrast in how the cases are tried. I'm not worried about it in Idaho, but those issues, if things stay the way they are, the way Ms. Kay's handling it, will not exist in Arizona.
Guys, we talked about this a little bit last week. Judge Boreski, when he threw Lori out, threatened to remove her ability to represent herself. And I still wonder, what kind of fallout or domino effect we could see if that were to happen. She clearly learned something from that exchange. Her demeanor changed a little bit. She apologized and hasn't. I mean, so far this morning, in her cross there were a few objections, but she continued to move on. I would love to know if we've ever seen something like this where somebody's been removed, their ability to represent themselves has been removed, and whether or not that has any implication on an appeal, but more so what is the domino effect? Because I would assume the prosecutor or the prosecution would have to change their approach a little bit, right? Maybe not as drastic as maybe a third defendant in this case. But Judge Mel, you tell me, have you ever had to do that? But if not, what would be the domino effect, if any, if she were to lose her ability to represent herself in this case?
Well, that is why you have advisory counsel as a backup. In the courtroom, a lawyer is expected to maintain certain standards. And there have been times when I was on the bench that you would call attorneys out. I would call them to the bench and would call a recess and go into chambers. And they would be chastised and would be warned. Lori is not above those standards. She's representing herself. The judge has every right to demand that she comply with the rules of the courtroom. And that would be part of the consequence. So I think what he's done, and properly so, is he's made a very precise record. If that next step has to happen, the record is clear. He's had bench conferences, he's had off-the-record discussions, and we've had the public hearing. He has warned her, and if it continued, he would have every right to do it. And her own stupidity, once again, would constitute a waiver on an appeal. She's lost that right. She's not above the law, and she's not above the lawyers. So if she disobeys the directive, disrupts the court, more power to him. Take it away from her. If you have to, put her on a video and let her sit in some other room to watch the remainder of the trial. But I'm confident that he's moving in the right direction.
Benjamin, when you have witnesses that are coming in soon, like Ray Hermosillo from Rexburg PD in Idaho, Nick Balance with the FBI, I mean, they've got the whole book on Lori Daybell and Chad. if you're on the defense, do you not even cross them? Because that's just, you're getting into uncharted territory. They've got all the details on her.
You always have to cross-examination them a little bit, right? Because if the jurors are there watching you and you're just sitting there doing nothing, the jurors gonna be like, "Why is Lori just sitting at the table?" So even if she asks maybe one or two questions, if that she has to give it a try. Maybe some basic general information like you didn't see me in the Jeep. You know that I wasn't part of this crime here in Arizona because you weren't a part of the investigation here in Arizona and you didn't see me at the scene. I mean, something. She has to at least try something because if she just sits there for the rest of the trial, not asking any questions, all the jurors are going to believe is what the prosecutor Trina K is saying and just be okay, on to the next witness, on to the next witness. So it's always dangerous to go battle to battle, toe to toe with some witnesses that can hurt your case. However, you have to ask some questions that are at least positive in your direction to show that you're putting up some sort of defense. So that way you're not just giving up this whole trial.
Rich, I know you're not surprised by how well Brandon did on the stand. I mean, he was literally even keel the whole time. Maybe a little bit emotional at times, but I was talking to another attorney about this. I mean, the rarity to see a victim take the stand and be questioned by the alleged perpetrator, not looking at the alleged suspect at the defense table and being questioned by a defense attorney, but by the person that you believe is the reason for all of this. What do you think the jury took away from Brandon's demeanor, his answers? What were the highlights for you as you watched someone that you worked very closely with?
Yeah, it's hard to put yourself into the place of the jurors because we do know that Brandon and have met him, so kind of have a different perspective on him than somebody who's just seeing him for the very first time. Mm-hmm. But any witness that handles themselves the way he did on the stand, that he is even-keeled, he didn't take the bait, he didn't engage with her in some angry way, that gives his answers a lot more credibility. And, I think that's, we hope that all of our witnesses will do that. It happens, we sort of talk to witnesses on both the defense and prosecution side about that very kind of thing, that you just listen to the questions, answer the questions straight up, try not to get engaged in the emotional part of it. That's one of the weird things about the criminal justice system from my perspective is that we try to wring out all of the emotion, and yet most of these cases are all about emotion, and so it creates a disconnect at times. In this case, I think it benefited Brandon. It benefited the case against Lori.
Rachel, if there was some sort of chance that there was a retrial in Idaho for that case, and I hope that's not the case for you. That was a lot of work, but people are asking if that happened, would death penalty be back on the table? Could the state seek that again? Because we know what happened with the whole death penalty issue in Idaho being taken off.
Yeah, I think it depends on the basis of the reversal. If it was reversed for say issues related to counsel, I really would depend on the basis for the reversal. But realistically, there is the possibility the death penalty could be back on the table. I don't know how to reiterate this. I've looked at that. The Lindsay Blake handled the 404B stuff. It was briefed. It was extensively done. There were extensive records made by Judge Boyce. I just don't see that happening. And the appellate issue raised doesn't include all of the reasons. Lori's lawyer was removed. So I'll be very interested to see the state's reply. Hopefully it's a little more robust than the issues raised. But I really, that was a very clean trial done by Judge Boyce.
All right, Benjamin, I'm going to ask you. We started asking this at this point in trial last time regarding Charles Vallow. Does Lori testify on her own behalf?
I think again she has to. I mean, right now it's it's an uphill battle for her to even win this case. So I think if she were to take the stand and look the jurors in the eye and say, "There's no record, there's no evidence of me being at the scene of this whole alleged shooting," I think she can get one or two jurors to maybe go on her side, right? But she didn't testify in her previous trials. She might not testify here. But in order, when you're losing the case, you have nothing else to lose. I mean, she might as well take the stand and try to convince one or two jurors, because a hung juror is a win for Lori Vallow.
This might be the case to do it. It's not like, the last one where she was in the home when Charles Vallow was shot and killed, and she went to Walgreens and Burger King and whatnot and didn't show up for another hour or so back to the scene. This is a case where we know she was living in Rexburg, Idaho. Obviously, there's communications that will be revealed between her and her late brother, Alex Cox, and to prove the conspiracy, that's on the state. But if there's any time to do it, this would be the chance to throw that Hail Mary. She's already serving life in prison. Judge Mel, what do you think?
Yeah, I think if she were to take the stand, we would add at least 3 to 4 days to the trial. It would be, if I was prosecuting that case every night in my prayers, I would pray for Lori to take the stand. There is so much ammunition that could be used against her. When we talk about could she sway a juror, she's got a remarkable ability. I contrast her with Brandon. Brandon is so genuine, sincere. You could sense his feelings, his remorse as this marriage is breaking up, as these twisted beliefs are going into his wife's mind. And you could see the devastation that he's experienced. With Lori, it's almost the opposite. I look back at the earlier trial where the gal that went out with Vallow a night or two before when he's killed, and she's trying to be indignant, she would go out with Charles Vallow. Will she take the stand? I am convinced she won't. I can't conceive any juror finding 1 ounce of credibility, and I think with her on the stand, they would chew her alive with some of the inconsistencies and some of the statements and some of the actions. I mean, going into that storage unit with the tires on the car, the garage, the car in the garage the day Charles Vallow is murdered, all of these things, she's not going to take the stand.
So I'm going to put you in Prosecutor Mel's shoes, not the judge. How would you prosecute this case? What witness, besides, of course, Brandon Boudreaux, would you really hone in on? What evidence do you really want to put out there to, and what's the motive here in this case? How do you present that to the jury?
Are you asking me or one of the others?
Yeah, I'm asking you to put your prosecutor hat on and give us and present the case. Go ahead.
I'm going to take the circumstantial pieces of evidence. The video of the tire and the removal going into the storage room, there's Lori. The relationship of Lori to Melanie. The trips that Melanie had taken just before to Idaho. The fact that no one else knows the address other than Melanie. All of these pieces, it's like building a pyramid. You put on point by point by point. This doomsday philosophy, these dark spirits coming in. There is so much evidence that you can put together in this circumstantial case. But I think the storage unit evidence is devastating. The tire off the Jeep in her car, the Texas plates. There is so much ammunition. It's literally like a jigsaw puzzle. And you put that puzzle together and you look the jury in the eye and say, there's not a missing piece in this puzzle. She's a cold-blooded serial killer. Well, they don't know this, but the fact is, all of these people have been killed And by the grace of God and by about an inch or two, Brandon Boudreaux is still alive.
Yeah.
And you also put Rich Robertson on the stand, right? Have him testify?
Then we'll get a directed verdict of guilt with Rich testifying.
Okay, thank you guys so much. We'll see you tomorrow for another day. We appreciate you. Everyone in the chat loves hearing from you guys on all the insights. So we'll see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you.